guys, today we are going to be trying out parts of the new collection from Lethal Cosmetics. They always send me emails when they're launching something new and they're like, hey, this is what we're launching, you can pick out whatever you want and we can send it to you. And this time they're coming out with two different palettes. So the first palette is going to be the Metamorphosis palette, which I actually said no to that one because number one, the color story is kind of monochromatic, and number two, there's a lot of things I want to film in December, and I also have some new stuff that have come in that I need to review, and I just didn't want to take on more than I felt like I could. So I accepted the color story that I felt like I would get along with the most and that I would enjoy the most. So this is the Evergreen palette, and this color story, obviously you can see this is very much me, so I'm super excited to be testing this out. This is already available. They have also come out with a new brush set, which I did say I wanted to try because you can never have too many brushes until you go to wash them, and then it's a pain in the ass. But so far I've used two of these. There are two large powder brushes here that I haven't used because I felt like for me they were just a little bit big for what I wanted. I prefer like smaller brushes just in general. So I did use this one for my concealer, which was really, really nice. And then I used this one for my bronzer, which I kind of feel like I'm gonna like this one more for blush because it was a little too flimsy for me to feel like I was able to blend up my bronzer nicely. I prefer kind of like flimsy brushes like this for blush, so I think that's going to work better for me. Oh, it does say on it is a blush brush. That makes a lot of sense. The one that I did use for my brush, however, was this one, which is probably meant for contour. But I really like these kind of slanted brushes for my blush, and this worked perfectly. So very, very happy with the quality of the brushes so far. It's just like some of the shapes aren't exactly what I reach for, but I'm also extremely picky when it comes to the brushes that I use, and I know what I like. So sometimes I'm like, I don't even really want to try out that brush for what it's intended for because I know it's not what I normally would use. So I'm just not even going to do that because I know I'm not going to like it, you know? So there are also a ton of eyeshadow brushes in here, which I am going to be testing most of these out. Again, some of them are a little too big for me to feel like I'll be able to be precise enough with the things that I like to do with my eyeshadows. I also do have extremely small eyes. I'm just a small person. I have a small frame, so even though my eyes themselves compared to my face might look kind of big, I have a very, very small head. So my eyes in, you know, the grand scheme of things are pretty small. So just want to put that out there. It also comes with a highlighting brush, which I really want to use that. So we're going to try that now. This is the 125. You can buy all of these in a set or individually, which I think is really nice. I'm going to use my Blend Bunny Noctilucent palette, and I'm just going to use my favorite shade in here just because I want to see how this actually applies the highlighter. So I'm going to take the shade here called Enlighten, which is the yellow one. So this is a fan brush, which is not really what I normally use for highlighter. But that actually works really, really nicely. I quite like that, and it's working very well with this formula as well. Okay, I like this. Normally with fan brushes, I find them to be too kind of flimsy and highlighter just like goes all over the place. But this one it's not stiff, but it's also, it has enough bristles, I feel like, to be able to pick up enough products and kind of distribute it nicely without it just flying all the way around. So I really like that. Yeah, that's a really nice brush. I can definitely see myself wanting to use that again. That's actually beautiful. I do have a non-affiliated code with Lethal that will save you some money. It's just Annette for 10% off. So we're gonna go ahead and prime. I'm going to use my Natasha Denona eyeshadow base, which I'm kind of running low on this one. I can tell I'm running low when the formula starts to get a little bit, not tackier, but you can kind of tell that the consistency changes a bit when it's getting low in the tube. So I'm gonna use this brush from the set to blend out my eyeshadow primer. I feel like this brush is gonna be too big for me to use with the eyeshadow. This is just a 210 blending brush, which, like I said, I mean, it covers like all of my eyes. So this one is too big for me to actually use with eyeshadow. So I like using the bigger brushes that I get in sets just for blending out my eyeshadow primer, and that always works really nicely. I will say though, the brushes are extremely soft, like very, very, very soft. I think there's really only one brush in this set that I can use for like putting down and blending colors, and it would be this one, which is the shading brush. It's kind of a small, flat packing brush with a bit of a thicker edge on it. Like these two are probably gonna be too big. This is more of an angle brush. I could maybe use that to smoke out underneath my eye, but for like blending purposes, it's too big for what I prefer in my brushes, and this one is definitely way too big. Like I would use this for highlighter. And this is the diffusing brush. I could maybe use it like buff out the edges, but even then it's like the size of my eye. So I'm gonna just use this one for my crease colors probably. There is another one in here which is really small. This is more of a small pencil brush. Yeah, that's what it's called. So maybe I can use that for my inner corner shade or something like that. So let's see. What do I feel like doing? I kind of want to play with a lot of these shades, and I think I'm gonna start with the chartreuse because that just feels like fun. Now I don't know the names in this palette because they are like on the back of the shadows, and the shadows are magnetic, so you can see in the back here it has holes in the palette, which I really like that about Lethal's shadows, especially if you're someone who has a lot of single shadows and you'd like to build your own palettes, or if you just have a lot of shadows from Lethal, you can mix and match them into like different palettes and make your own color stories and stuff, and I think that's really cool. The one thing I will say about this palette is when I first opened this and I looked at this palette, I was like, did they accidentally put in two of the same shade? Because this shade and this shade in the lighting where I open it looked exactly the same. And I did see like subtle differences when I swatched it, but I also feel like we definitely didn't need both of those in this palette. And I think maybe this one or this one could have been nicer as more of an iridescent blue shade or something like that, because it's a very dark palette and I do feel like we kind of need a little bit of brightness, even though there's one bright shade in here. These two just feel a little bit too similar for my liking, but they are beautiful shades individually. But I think if I were to change anything about this palette, I would just like switch out one of these with something else, and I think it would work a little bit better. I also am not really sure what I'm gonna do with this shade. Like this matte doesn't really, like color theory wise, want to blend into any of the other mattes, so I'm a little bit like, what do I do with that? I wish there was something that we could use to either blend this out with or deepen this up with, but I just feel like it's gonna get a little bit muddy if you're not careful, so I'm probably not gonna use this shade. I think I'm gonna use this one, maybe this one, and like one of the darker greens, and then do like maybe a blue in this one on the lid, or I don't know, we'll figure it out. I'm gonna start with this shade up here, which I think is absolutely beautiful. And I'm gonna start by just packing that in the front portion of my crease here and see how vibrant I am able to get this. That is looking really, really nice. Some of these mattes didn't swatch very well, so I was a little bit worried that maybe they wouldn't go on as pigmented as maybe I wanted to, but that's looking very, very nice. I do feel like this color is losing its intensity a little bit once I start blending. I'm sorry, there are dogs out there, and yeah, we have people in our house that usually aren't here, so if it's a little loud, I'm sorry. I think I'm next gonna go into, again, I'm sorry, I'm gonna take this green shade here, and I'm gonna take that in the outer portion of my crease and blend it into the chartreuse that we used. I told myself when I sat down to do this that I wasn't going to do an all green look, but that is looking like what it's going to end up being, because there's a lot of green in this palette and there's a lot of green mattes in this palette, and the green mattes in this palette are the mattes that make the most sense to use together. So I feel like a lot of people are going to end up doing an all green look with this, and I really didn't want to be that person. And I'm sorry if everyone else is doing the same thing, but it kind of just makes sense. These are working very nicely together, and this brush is really good as well. It wouldn't be my first choice probably for like putting down mattes and blending mattes into my crease, but it's doing what I wanted to do and I think it's performing well. I'm gonna try to deepen this up a bit, and I think I'm gonna use, maybe I'll take the teal shade instead of the dark green, because I am tempted to use one of these blues on my lid, and I feel like if I have more of a blue-based green, that's gonna make a little bit more sense. So I'm gonna start just packing that in the outer corner of my eye and just blend it into the outer portion of my crease here as well. I am a little bit worried that maybe this won't layer the best, and I feel like I'm having a little bit of, it's just sticking weirdly, and I kind of had a feeling that this would happen just from swatching them, because they are a very, very dry formula, and I don't always find Lethal's shades to build the best on top of each other. But it does seem like the more I kind of pack on, the nicer it is looking, but I would probably recommend going dark to light with these mattes and these colors in particular, because I don't feel like I'm getting the best, like, smoothest layer here. It's almost like when I'm trying to layer it over the top of that lighter green, it's looking a little bit patchy, and like it's not building perfectly. It's not looking bad by any means, and I'm not gonna bring anything else in, but I do feel like it's taking a little bit of just finessing for these two to layer on top of each other nicely and be nice and opaque. Yeah, I feel like I'm seeing it even more so on this eye. Like this dark shade really doesn't want to like stick very nicely on top of the lighter green. But since I am gonna put probably a shimmer mostly over this anyway, it's not a big deal at all. But I've always kind of said that Lethal doesn't have my favorite matte formula. I just prefer something that's a little bit more buildable and a little bit more punchy. It's not that these aren't pigmented, but I just don't feel like they are as rich as some other mattes that I have in my collection, and sometimes they tend to kind of blend away a little bit once you start like layering and blending. But I mean, that is looking really nice. I'm not going to complain about that. It just took a little bit, and just looking up close, it's not looking perfect, but totally fine. I'm next going to take the small pencil brush here, and I think I'm going to use the dark green shade here to kind of wrap underneath my eye, and then I'm going to use the brown just like mostly on the front portion here, because I just want to test out one more shade. And these are looking like, you can't even see that I'm using two different shades here. That is looking exactly the same as the lid shade. So I do feel like there are like a couple of, not repeat shades, but maybe there could have been a bit more of a difference between them, just so that you don't feel like you're using the same shades when you're not. I'm gonna switch to a smaller pencil brush here that's not from Lethal, and I'm gonna take the brown shade, and I'm just gonna put that in the front portion of my lower lash line. I'm probably gonna layer something over the top of this because I do want to brighten this a little bit, but I just wanna see what the color looks like. That is a really pretty brown shade. And I do think this was a nice addition in this palette because it does work with a lot of these other colors. So let's do some shimmers. I am going to put on some of my NYX glitter primer before I do the shimmers, and I still haven't quite decided which ones I want to use. I probably want to use 2 or probably 3, honestly, because I probably can't help myself because I just want to use as many as possible. I'm just putting the glitter primer basically all over my lid because that is where I want the shimmers to go. Just a very small layer of this. And I'm going to start with one of the blue shades, and I think I'm going to use... Honestly, they just look so similar. I think I'm going to use this one because that one seems to have more of a yellowy shift to it, and I feel like that's going to look nice with this. So I'm going to take that in the middle of my lid and just kind of pull it out and blend it out into that matte shade. And this is absolutely stunning, which I wasn't expecting anything less from the shade because I swatched it and I was like, that is very pretty, and I'm a sucker for blue shimmers, and I knew I was gonna love that. So that is really pretty. I'm just gonna basically put that all over my outer corner just to kind of make sure I blend that over the matte here that I did have a little bit of patchiness with. It might not even have shown up on camera, but just trust me when I say up close, it didn't look the absolute best, but when you layer a shimmer over the top, you're not gonna be able to see it at all. And I think I'm gonna use some of this shade just on the front portion, and then I can use this to sort of lighten it up if I need to. So that's gonna be the plan. Let's see how this ends up looking. Now that I think about it, the shade names might have actually been on the sleeve on the palette that it came with, but I threw that away as soon as I opened it because I don't keep the sleeves on my palettes because I just find that to be annoying. So I'm sorry. That probably was the case actually. But this is beautiful. That is really pretty, and I love how this has a bit of a greeny shift to it because it works so well with that chartreuse shade. And these shimmers together, oh, that looks so good. And because I do just want a little bit more brightness, I'm gonna go in with this very light yellow. It's not an iridescent shimmer, but it's definitely a very, very light shimmer. I'm just gonna put that in the inner corner of my eye, as well as a bit underneath my eye on my lower lash line as well. Just gonna blend that over the brown shade. And I think this is all I'm gonna do for the look. So I'm just gonna quickly go ahead and finish off, and I'll come back and give you my first impression thoughts on this palette. I just popped on some lashes and I did a bit of green in my waterline. I'm using the green one from Udensai. I always forget the name of it. It's the number 6. And then for my lashes today, I'm using a pair of Orc lashes. I did make an order for Black Friday to pick up another pair of these because I really like these. These are the clouded ones and I'm wearing the half lash. And these are just perfect. Like, I don't need to trim them or anything. I just pop them on and they look great, and they're kind of subtle but like pretty at the same time. I really like her lashes. I think they're so easy to use, and I feel like I got a lot of use out of the other pair that I had. I don't know where it ended up. Like, it literally just disappeared. So I ended up just buying 2 more of these for Black Friday. I did buy this one as well. This is the one in the style Viceroy, because I wanted to try them, and I feel like the half lashes in this one are going to be a little too big for me, but I actually like the full lashes a little bit more. I don't know, I'm gonna have to try them on, but they look like they'll be a little bit too long, just a smidge maybe, but I don't know, we're gonna have to wait and see. But I didn't feel like fussing with a lash that I maybe wouldn't like today, so I just put on one that I knew I would. So to sum up, I guess my thoughts on this, I'm sorry I'm not doing more looks, but like I said, I have other things that have come in as well, and I'll show you one of them. I did end up getting this one, which is the Nimia palette from Nikki Tutorials, and I think I'm gonna do a 3-look video with this palette just because I'm very familiar with Lethal's formula, and this is a brand that I haven't tried before, so I really want to make up my mind about this palette, which is a very neutral palette, but I really want to make up my mind about the formula on this. So I'm gonna focus a little bit more time on that palette than I probably normally would with a palette with that color story. But since I'm so familiar with Lethal's formula, and I'm pretty sure that this is the formula that they've always had, or like, you know, recently anyway. I mean, this is the formula that I'm used to from Lethal, and I like it. The mattes aren't my favorite, like I've said before, but I think they're totally workable, and I think if you go dark to light, you're not going to have any issues at all, and they'll be nice and pigmented, and you'll be able to do exactly what you want with them. But I feel like for myself, I can't fully trust Lethal's mattes to be able to do exactly what I want them to do at any given time, and so I tend to, on days where I'm not filming, reach for other mattes that I feel like I can trust a little bit more, especially if I'm in a hurry. I don't want to spend a ton of time on my makeup. Probably wouldn't be reaching for these mattes in particular, but I think they're beautiful. I think the color story is really nice, and I think the shimmers are beautiful as well. Like I said earlier, my only complaint would be that I feel like some of the shades are a little too similar. These two are maybe tad too similar, and then this one and this one are a little too similar just for my liking. But again, just personal preference, and that's just how I feel when it comes to a palette of that size. I don't really feel like any of the shades should be so similar that on the eyes they almost look like the same shade, but they're still beautiful individually. The brushes, I think, are really, really nice quality. It really just comes down to your preferences when it comes to brush shapes. If you like the same kind of brush shapes that I like, maybe this wouldn't be the perfect set for you, but I know myself, and I know that there are going to be a couple of brushes, both in the face brushes and the eye brushes, that I'm going to reach for over and over and over again, and a lot of them I probably will just give to a friend or something like that because I know that they're going to like them a little bit more than me. But I think quality wise, if this looks like something that you would be interested in, I think you would really like them. So that's going to be my thoughts on the collection. Let me know if you picked this up, because this is, like I said, already available. So thank you so much for watching. If you want to see some more Lethal content, I will have my playlist up on the screen, and if you're new, don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.